Chapter 2. The Letter. Mrs. Bracken made me wait outside Miss Hiff's office for ages before she finally opened the door to let me in. Whiffy Hiffy's usually not too bad. In the past she'd always smiled at me whenever we passed each other in the corridor, but I took one look at her face and I didn't feel any better. What have you been saying about me? I thought, and I scowled at Mrs. Bracken. Whatever it was, it hadn't been very pleasant. That much was obvious from Miss Hiff's expression. My heart was dancing like a Mexican jumping bean as I stood in front of the headmistress. Her office was small and square, with grey filing cabinets against one wall and a huge wooden table just in front of the windows. Miss Hiff sat behind the table, her arms folded and resting on it as she leaned forward. She had dark brown eyes and black hair with streaks of grey all through it. We called her Whiffy Hiffy because she wore a really strong perfume that smelt of flowers and made you want to sneeze. I have just one question to ask you, Vicky, and I want you to tell me the truth, Miss Hiff began. I know how good at programming you are. Did you work out these answers yourself, or did they come courtesy of your considerable computer skills? I tried to think of something to say that wouldn't get me into worse trouble. Okay, so I used my own calculator instead of the school's prehistoric ones, but no one had ever said I couldn't. The thought popped into my head that no one had ever said I could either. But I made that pop out again. I'm waiting, Vicky, Miss Hiff said. Yes or no, Miss Hiff asked. Yes, I did, but... Miss Hiff leaned back in her chair. I see. I'm disappointed in you, Victoria. Deeply disappointed. So you admit that you cheated? I never said that, I replied hotly. I didn't see it as cheating exactly. Then how did you see it? Exactly. Miss Hiff asked sternly. Well, no one ever said I couldn't do it, I muttered, which was a big mistake because I should have kept that little thought to myself. Victoria, I can't believe you said that. You know a lot better than that, Miss Hiff said sharply. But Miss Hiff, no buts, Victoria. I can't imagine what you were thinking of. This was a maths exam, not a test of your computing ability and deviousness. Not that I would have approved of your methods in the latter case. Did you really think we wouldn't catch you? Miss Hiff leaned even further forwards on the desk. Her brown eyes glinted like marbles. No, yes, I didn't know what I thought. I guess I didn't really think about it. Really, I thought I was being clever. Clever? Do you realise that at the very least I'm going to have to suspend you? Miss Hiff asked. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I stared at her so hard, I'm surprised my eyes didn't pop out of my head and plop onto the carpet. Suspend? You're joking, I whispered. Do I look like I'm joking? Miss Hiff said stonily. This is very serious, Victoria. Very serious indeed. You cheated to get the answers to your maths exam, and not only that, but you were disgracefully rude with it. I would never have thought it of you. I have your mother's phone number at work, so I'll give her a call and ask her to come and see me. No, you can't. You can't phone Mum. I didn't mean to shout, but I could feel myself beginning to panic. Mum and Dad, what on earth would they say about all this? And how was I rude? How was it rude to use a calculator? But, and why not? Miss Hiff asked. I took a quick look at Mrs. Bracken, who stood beside me, shaking her head down at me. I could just hear the youth of today, or one of her other soppy phrases rattling around in her head. I turned back to the headmistress. I couldn't believe it. I was going to be suspended for using my calculator. Was this fair or what? Mum isn't... she isn't well, I said reluctantly. Oh, what's wrong with her? Asked Miss Hiff. I swallowed hard. This was horrible. Now I'd have to talk about private family stuff. Mum's 6 months pregnant and she's not very well. She has high blood pressure and she's only just been let out of the hospital. Her doctor said she's got to take it easy and she mustn't get upset. Every part of Miss Hiff's face seemed to be frowning. Her lips were upside down, her eyes were turned down, even the many lines on her forehead bent down at the ends. Very well then, I shall phone your father, Miss Hiff said. Oh, couldn't you call him on a Monday? I pleaded. Friday's his busiest day at the bank. I can't help with that, Miss Hiff said firmly. Mrs. Bracken, would you get Mr. Gibson's work number from the school secretary, please? If she ran any faster, I think she'd have taken off. I thought as Miss Bracken fairly sprinted from the room. Vicky, now that we're alone, is there anything you'd like to tell me before I phone your father? Asked Miss Hiff. Like what? I thought. No, I shook my head. Is everything okay at home? Miss Hiff asked gently. My face felt like it was on fire. I knew what she was getting at. Did my parents quarrel, or did my mum throw saucepans at my dad, or me, or something equally ridiculous? I got on fine with Mum and Dad. In fact, Dad and I spent a lot of time together. He was the one who got me interested in computing in the first place, and he was teaching me all about the computer system they use at his bank. And if Gib and I had the occasional quarrel, so what? All brothers and sisters argue sometimes. Vicky, Miss Hiff prompted. Everything's fine, miss, I said. I was so embarrassed. I just wanted to crawl under Miss Hiff's table. Then why did you do it? I'm at a loss to understand. Here we are, Miss Hiff. Miss Bracken walked back into the office, closing the door behind her. This is Victoria's card. A small index card was handed to the headmistress. She picked up the phone and dialed. I tried to read what was on it, but it was too far away and upside down at that. Good morning, Miss Hiff said almost immediately. I'd like to speak to Mr. David Gibson, please. There was a pause, and then the headmistress repeated her request. Yes, that's right, Mr. Gibson. Oh, I see. No, I'm the headmistress of Burrow School. I wanted to talk to him about his daughter. Oh, I see. All right then. Thank you for your help. Miss Hiff put the phone down. She was frowning even more now. Your father's not there, and he won't be back today, Miss Hiff explained. It was my turn to frown now. Dad was always at the bank on Fridays. If he wasn't there, then where was he? It seems as if I'm destined not to speak to either of your parents today. But I want to see your father early next week without fail. Wait outside whilst I write a letter to him and your mother. Mrs. Bracken ushered me outside. I racked my brains for something to say that would sort all of this out, but there was nothing in my head and nothing in my mouth. The story of my life. All I could think about was what Mum and Dad would say. I'd never been in trouble at school before. That was usually Gibbs' department. Mum and Dad were always saying to him, why can't you be more like your sister? As I stood outside Miss Hiff's office, I realised I'd never hear Mum and Dad ask that particular question again. Suspended. Even Gib had never been suspended. He'd never even come close, and he was always getting into trouble. And now I had outdone him in one fell swoop. But that wasn't the worst of it. What were Mum and Dad going to say? Vicky, wait for me. Stupidly, I turned my head to see Gib legging it after me, his jacket off his shoulders and his school bag waving about all over the place as he ran. I carried on walking even faster. Gib was the last person I wanted to speak to. Didn't you hear me calling you? Gib puffed angrily once he'd caught up with me. What do you want? I snapped. I want to make sure you're all right, Gib said. I stopped walking and looked at him straight in the eye. Do I look like I'm stupid? Don't answer that, I said quickly as Gib opened his mouth to reply. You just want to know what Whiffy Hiffy said to me, you nosy bag. Gib started to smile. Well, you can't blame me. So what did Miss Hiff say? The smile in his face was getting bigger and bigger. None of your business, I replied. I started walking again. Oh, go on. I won't tell anyone. Gib carried on. Don't be so bloomin' nosy. I said, glaring at him. Don't be like that, Gibbs said. I'm only asking. Did she expel you? No, she did not, I exploded. At least not yet. If you must know, she asked me if I'd use my calculator to answer all the questions in the maths test correctly. When I said yes, she went on and on about how cheating was beneath me and how I ought to be ashamed of myself. Then she made me sit outside her office for the rest of the afternoon. I didn't cheat. At least I didn't realise it was cheating. I didn't mean to cheat, unlike some people I saw whom I could mention. But Mum and Dad aren't going to care about that. They're both going to both going to go through the ceiling. I slowed down. Walking so fast was making my legs ache. Gib fell into line next to me. We very rarely walked home together, so it felt slightly strange. Your calculator? I don't understand. How can you cheat using a grotty school calculator? Gib said. I used the programmable calculator Mum and Dad had bought me for Christmas to answer the questions, I admitted. I still don't see what all the fuss is about. Just because I didn't use one of the stupid diddly school calculators. So how did you do it? Gib asked. I could see he was impressed, even though he tried his best not to show it. I shrugged. I wrote a program to do it for me. Then all I had to do was input the number of sides the shape had and any of the angles as given on the exam paper. Or input any of the other details and get back the proper angles and areas and whatnot. It was a doddle. So Mrs. Bracken told Hiffy that you used your calculator? Gib asked. She probably took great pleasure in doing so as well, I sighed. We walked on for a while in silence. Then Gib said, You didn't help your own case much by leaning back in your chair, grinning up at the assembly hall clock. I saw you. Very subtle. I don't think so. I wouldn't have done it if I'd have known they were going to get all nuclear about it, I said with disgust. It was Mrs. Bracken. If it was Mrs. Bracken, I would have impressed my sharpness. Instead of which, you get accused of cheating. Gib's lips twitched. I'm glad one of us thinks it's funny, I said angrily. I should have known I wouldn't get much sympathy from you. I marched away from him. Sorry I'd said a word. Hang on, Vicky. I'm sorry. So, what did happen? Did you get detention next week or what? Gib asked, jogging after me. Slowly I shook my head. I wouldn't mind if it was just detention. I wouldn't even mind detention for the rest of the term. But Miss Hiff wants to see Dad on Monday, and she's talking about suspending me. Suspending you? Gib repeated, astounded. Wow. Mum and Dad aren't going to like that. Why don't you go and do an A-level in the bloomin' obvious? I hissed. You'd get an A star. Don't take it out on me, Gib snapped back. I didn't tell you to cheat. I didn't cheat, I shouted. I didn't see it as cheating for a single second. And you better hope that Mum and Dad agree with you and see it your way and not Miss Hiff's. Pushing my hand further into my jacket pocket, I fingered the envelope Miss Hiff had given me for Mum and Dad. They won't see my sides of things, I sighed. Not after they see this. I took out the now grubby and crumpled envelope and showed it to Gib. Miss Hiff had signed her name across the back flap of the envelope and stuck it down with at least 3 pieces of sellotape. The front of the envelope had Mum and Dad's names, as well as our address typed on it. Do you know what it says? Gib asked, turning it over and over in his hands. I haven't got a clue, but I can guess. Gib nodded. So, what are you going to do? What do you think I should do? I asked. Gib looked straight at me. Open it. I can't do that, I said aghast. I'm in enough trouble as it is. I can't just... Gib raised his hands. It's all right. I knew you wouldn't do it. You don't have the guts. Guts have nothing to do with it, I argued. I've just as much guts as you or anyone. Then prove it. Open it. Okay, genius. And just how do I stick it back down afterwards? I'll never get Miss Hiff's signature to line up again. Simple, Gibbs said so glibly that I wanted to chuck a bucket of ice-cold water over him. You type out another envelope and put the letter in that. Mum and Dad will never know that Miss Hiff's signature was on the back of the original. There speaks an expert, I said sourly. Now, usually I would have told Gib where to go after making a suggestion like that. I've got a lot more common sense than he has, but he's only a boy, so what do you expect? But at the moment, all I could think about was getting suspended from school, and how Dad would be disappointed, and how Mum would get upset, especially when she wasn't supposed to. So I thought, if only I knew what the letter said, then I could prepare them, and me, for the worst.